I'm going to do something very different than a typical lap walkthrough video. Most of the time, people will walk through the lap and talk about break points and turn-in points and things like that. But quite frankly, you can see that in the video, and it's been done a bunch of times. What I'm going to do is walk you through what I'm thinking mentally as I set pole at the 2026 WRL event at Barber. Now, this is somewhat unique because I only had about 5 laps of practice, so I'm having to learn the track as I'm qualifying the car, and I'm wanting to put it on pole. Ended up putting on pole by a few thousandths of a second, which I knew right away. So I also knew I needed to think about how am I going to improve for the next day to make sure we can build a larger gap to the field. But also I need to know what I'm doing in those changes so I can explain them to my co-drivers. Part of my job is to coach. So I've got to think about this. I can't just drive by feel. So I'm going to walk you through what I'm thinking about in this pole lap at Barber. All right, so here we go. About to come through the last corner, coming out of the straightaway. What I'm thinking about here is making sure I get a great run, because if I do not have a good run off the last corner, I'm not even going to bother with pushing for a qualifying lap. So I get the car all the way to the right, get on the straightaway. Okay, feels good. You'll see I radio here and say I have traffic that lap, so I'm going to go ahead and do another lap. So we're about to go in turn one. What's interesting about turn one is it falls down very quickly with a little bit of off camber, but then at the base of the apex, it has a ton of camber. So I've learned here is I must be off the brakes as I turn in. Now, you watch my other videos, I tell you, man, trail braking is key, brake all the way to the apex. This is one of those corners that's unique. And the reason why is the ground falls away from you. So naturally the car is going to oversteer. So I found is I want to brake only about 30%, and I'm going to let the car float down to that pocket, which is the camber at the bottom. So the only thing I'm thinking about here is sending it super fast, and all I want to do is be off the brake pedal. That'll ensure the car is stable, and that no matter what happens, I can still catch the car. So I don't care if I'm going to run off the track on the exit of one, that's fine. I can deal with that. What I can't deal with is a massive oversteer on entry, because now I'm going to have to slow down and bind up the car to get it straight again. So off the brakes before turning, especially in this car, and just send it. I don't care where the car ends up on the exit, because there's a very short distance to turn two. Very little wheel input. You can see I run off the track here, no problem. So this one is interesting. So turn two, what I'm trying to do is get over left as much as possible, and that varies depending on how I get through one. But what I want to do is then turn very abruptly and brake straight so I can get my downshift done. I actually didn't do it really well on this lap, which is something I thought about during the race, is that I need to work on getting the car straight so I can get this downshift done while not upsetting the car, because you're going to be turning. The corner is just so long. Next thing I'm thinking about is getting on the power as early as possible. So you want to roll really quickly into turn two, but I want to get on the power. Okay, now I'm going through two. Now I'm worried about this guy in front of me. So he just came out of the pits. I think he's qualified third at this point. And so I'm wondering what he's thinking. He pulled out in front of me, but he has the right to the track too. So I'm trying to decide how to make sure I don't lose my run. At first, it looks like he's leaving me some opening on the inside, but then, he's on the power and trying to get a run himself. So I'm just going to stay on the throttle. I'll go around the outside here. I got a little momentum. I got warm tires, etc. So the next thing I'm looking at is this is a fast braking zone into a fairly tight corner. So this lap, I decided I'm going to brake about a car length deeper than I ever have and just see what happens. If you look closely, you may not be able to tell, but you'll see the green indicator on the dash showing that I pick up quite a bit of pace, about 2 to 3 tenths on entry, and then ultimately lose a tenth on the exit, but that's okay. So I send it super deep here, brake all the way to the apex. I'm slowing that car down all the way until I get there. And what I want to do is get the wheel straight right about here. The corner actually has two kind of corners to it. There's a double apex, sort of. You don't double apex it, though. You kind of drive straight through the middle. So I need to be full throttle by this point. Now, I've decided to leave the car in 4th gear and let it sit on the rev limiter. It's because this entry is very quick, probably 5th gear even if I was in it. But what I want to do is not have to deal with too many downshifts down this next S section. And I also don't want to deal with the extra upshift while trying to turn in. You'll notice I'm actually full throttle on turn in. So here you can see I turn the wheel very slowly because I'm going very quick and I want the car to be in control. What I mean by that is, I mentioned turn one, I don't care if I'm out of control. There's not a lot going on. I just send it in there. This one, I need to get the car slowed down and I need to do it over the bumps on the left. So I need to have the car completely stable before I hit that first curb on the left so that I can make sure I get to the brakes and the car will stop, because otherwise I'm in the air. So I'm going to run over the curb on the right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on the brakes before I get to the left curb. Then I'm going to release the brakes to about half of what the brake pressure I was over the curbing, and then back on the brakes as I go into the end of this section and head to the right. Over the curb a little bit, brake, brake, brake. I've got to get the car slowed down because this is downhill. So the problem with this is I'm in the air, I'm running over the curbs. So I've got ABS doing its thing. It's downhill, so the car wants to accelerate. So what I've got to do is make sure I get the front end planted hard enough to get it turned here because I'm about to lead down a very fast section. Little understeer here, maybe. Still pretty good lap, but that's something I'm going to work on. So this next section here is absolutely flat. However, if you turn in too early, you will scrub speed or drop tires on the left. So instead of taking like a slalom approach to these curbs, I'm actually following the curb to the left a little bit more than you would think, and then I go back right. And that makes sure the car is not bound up on the exit, because I also am making a 4th to 5th shift on the exit. So if the car is bound up, when you make that shift into the next gear, it's going to really bog down. So I'm trying to make sure it's free on exit. Follow the curbing a little more to the left, and then turn back right. Now I don't need to use all the exit. I'm perfectly good here. Now this next section is tricky, not because it's technically difficult, but the result of a mistake can be catastrophic. So we always think about risk versus reward. This is one of those corners where the reward is quite high, but the risk is quite high. It's very fast. We'll enter it in 5th gear and then do the downshift afterwards. So what I've learned about this corner is that I needed to brake a lot later and a lot softer to keep the car stable so I can fall down the hill. Again, kind of like turn 1, I'm losing grip as I fall down the hill. But as soon as I land, I need to get the car back to the right so I can make it through the right over the hill and I can be on the throttle. So if you overslow, though, it's a very fast section. You lose a lot of time. So in a slow section, you can kind of overslow a little to make sure you get power down. But in this fast section, you just can't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it in really hard, really loud on the brakes. And right as the car compresses the bottom, I can make my transition to the right. And I continue to evolve this. I ended up being quite a bit faster in the race, by the way. And this is one of the areas that I found speed. You can hear I barely am on the brakes, just really lightly. Otherwise, the car wants to oversteer. Also, it's blind. Don't know exactly where I'm at. Again, this is like lap 7 or 8 total on the track. But I'm really focused on getting on the power through this exit. So I do my downshift and then get on the throttle. And what I want to do is make sure once I get on the throttle, I'm absolutely planted and I don't have to lift as I go over this hill. So one thing I've noticed as I enter this corner is that it's tough to tell here, but the inside of the curb, this piece right on the inside, is starting to turn black. So actually where the dirt is turning black. That tells me that there's a lot of cars using that curb in all of it. So although I don't know if I do it this lap, I definitely evolved into it as the race went. I started hanging half the right front over that curb, not all of it. If this had been a sprint race, 30-minute, 45-minute event, I've probably been running the right side tires to the dirt there. However, we have 8 hours one day, 7 hours the next to go. I don't want to risk fatiguing suspension components dumping off the right side of that dirt. But I am going to use the edge of that curb and then about the middle of the tire to help it turn. Let's see if I do it on this qualifying lap. Kind of ran over the curb, but that's one of those things I was thinking about. I can do better. So that's one of the elements that I improved on once we got to the race, is using that curb to help the car rotate, because the car does understeer pretty badly here. Now this section is super tough. What I was trying to do is figure out what is my reference. If you've ever driven Barber, this corner is so tough because there is not a reference. At least nothing I could see without looking at it. Yes, there's some stuff on the left, but it's super peripheral. It's 50, maybe 100 feet off the track. So what I found, and this I didn't find in qualifying, what I did find in qualifying is I didn't do this very well, so I needed to work on it. This lap was actually pretty good, but it was more luck. I just kind of sent it in super deep and was able to gather it up before I got into the right-hander. But I can't just send it during an 8-hour race. So what I started doing is figuring out what my reference was going to be. And ultimately it ended up actually being the right stripe, that white stripe on the right side of the track. And because the corner goes slowly and then tightens up, you actually lose the white line as it tightens up, because the grass is this long, paint's thin, so you lose it as it takes a sharp corner. So I started using that as my reference. I just stare at that white line, and at the moment I couldn't see the white line, that was my breaking point. And it worked fantastically during the race. Made a lot of passes here. That's something else you have to be thinking about is, in an endurance race, is how am I going to make passes, especially on cars that are in higher classifications that are faster. And this is it, because a lot of people were braking early because they didn't have a good reference or inconsistently. So I would either outbrake them on the outside if they were blocking, or outbrake them on the inside. It was all because I found that that white line would disappear, and that was my new reference point for braking. You see I get it a little hot here, but get it recovered by the apex. That's the most important thing. I'm like, oh crap, if I keep the car sliding as we go into this, I can't get on the power. So I'm trying to get the car slowed down and then back to steering into the corner before the apex, which I was able to do, which means I have a great run here off the corner. And again, focused on getting a good run the straightaway. And here we go. Now this corner is a bit interesting. It wants to be full throttle. And I feel like we put more front grip in the car, it would be, but then the car would be very difficult to drive everywhere else. So instead what I'm doing is I'm turning in full throttle. I'm just releasing like 70% just to get that front end grip, and I'm back on the throttle. It's really important that you run over this left curb or you will have to lift on the exit. And if you lift on the exit, your lap is done. One of the things I coach is you've got to start applying the throttle at the apex and continually to do so. If you can't, it means you entered the apex too quickly, or you possibly got on the throttle too hard, and so on. So if I don't want to lose this run, I'm up 0.2 of a second according to the dash right now. I need to make sure I'm rolling on the throttle and I can keep getting into it. So lots of curb. And looking to get a good run on the straightaway here, and you'll see I asked the crew if it was enough. That should do it, right? And it did. So that's a lap around Barber, kind of thinking about how a driver coach goes about approaching when he only has a few laps and he has to qualify the car. And then I'm going to take that those instructions and coach the guys I'm driving with to make sure we all are safe and fast the rest of the weekend.